Mother Nature, the most powerful and beautiful being on earth. Strong but delicate, calm yet violent, we have lived in peace on our world, not thinking anything of it. But with the development of fossil fuels and the increasing issues of climate change further approaching, we need to take action. With this, we ask ourselves, why? So what? How does climate change affect me? Well, we're here to talk about effects of climate change here in Washington State.
We always hear about climate change as a whole, and it's a pretty broad, undescriptive topic. But we never really try to personalize it or do a deep dive into how it would affect us in our surrounding area, which we really should do because the effects of climate change are extremely important to the present and future, and really is something that we should all know a little bit more about.
For starters, something I'm sure we've all heard, one of the biggest causes of climate change is the use of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have been in major use for over a century now, with very apparent consequences. Earth's overall temperature has been rising at a rate never seen before, which could annihilate everything in existence. Just kidding. But seriously, it will seriously harm human activity, environments, economy, and living conditions. First of all, rising sea levels, which happens mostly due to the melting ice caps and glaciers, has a big impact on all of Washington. The entire west coast would be damaged, and the Puget Sound would also raise a lot, sinking parts of large cities like Seattle, and also potentially intoxicating coastal aquifers with seawater, further making coastal areas harder to live in.
And just like rising sea levels, which happens due to the rising temperatures that melt ice caps, there will also be an increase in wildfires. Eastern Washington, already seeing hotter and drier summers, will get even hotter, therefore getting a higher chance of wildfires. The west side will also get these risks, but with a slightly lower chance due to the humidity. However, with the rising temperatures comes less snow. With less snow, that will dry up or shrink many rivers or lakes that gain most of their water from meltwater.
All of this also directly affects wildlife in a multitude of ways. In freshwater sources, certain species of fish will have a much harder time spawning and surviving. Salmon, for instance, is a huge part of the fishing industry and the population, which many predators such as bears rely on every year. However, with the effects of climate change in full gear, the very vulnerable and temperature-sensitive salmon will have a harder time making the journey to spawning grounds.
Not to mention the fact that salmon eggs are also pretty sensitive to warmer temperatures and could die weeks or even days into development. In fact, most freshwater fish species will be at a huge risk due to rising temperatures in the water, along with the lower level of dissolved oxygen in freshwater sources because it affects all of them extremely negatively.
One other very important thing that is already an extremely pressing issue is the survival of amphibians such as frogs, salamanders, and newts. Amphibian populations have been steadily declining since the 1960s, but in the past 20 years the situation has taken a drastic plummet downhill. With climate change becoming more prevalent as well as the continued polluting of water sources, which these animals depend on, we could see even more species becoming extinct or even the extinction of most amphibians as a whole.
With marine life, we could actually see a decline in baleen whales, or whales that primarily feed on plankton. Raising the surface temperature by just a few degrees could mass kill off huge populations of plankton, and therefore cause a sudden detrimental change in these whales' environments. Since their prey is so small, baleen whales have to eat a giant amount of plankton every day to keep them from starving. And well, with their main source of food gone, they wouldn't be able to do much.
Besides its effects on aquatic life, water sources becoming scarcer would bring a lot more animals to the brink of dehydration, especially in environments where it used to be readily available everywhere. Not that ideal. Warming temperatures would mess with the environment of animals and some other resources, and make some other resources very minimal. This could eventually lead to extinction of some species that don't have what they need to survive.
Yeah, I'd prefer not to die of dehydration. And with the rising temperature, we could also see the emergence of a lot more invasive reptiles in Washington, which could also severely lower the population of small mammals or birds. And there would also most likely cause more parasites like ticks to become more abundant in forests and plains. More parasites gathering in one area isn't going to be very fun for anyone, and could be particularly dangerous for larger animals which have a harder time getting them off.
On top of that, the chances would greatly increase for natural disasters to occur, and things like storms would be prolonged and heavier. Drier summers would lead to greater chances of wildfires, which could do a lot of damage to environments and also human beings in general.
So we come back to the question, why? So what? Why does this matter to me? I'm not a fish or a frog. If you haven't thought about it yet, you really should, because our future depends on stopping or slowing the effects of climate change. Raised temperature directly affects us, our cities, our pets, the list goes on. It makes us more vulnerable to wildfires, tsunamis, tornadoes, a bunch of other natural disasters that can happen and will happen more and more as the effects of climate change increase. More drastic rain and wind could also play parts in harder environments and, destruction.
The acidification of the ocean would also see great damage to marine life and the fishing industry in general. Rising temperatures in freshwater sources as well, such as Lake Washington, which is important to the salmon spawning, could harbor fishing industries as salmon populations decline due to the increased temperature.
We will see the increase of natural disasters, especially wildfires in Washington's case, would cause further damage to environments and human life due to longer, drier, hotter summers.
Finally, we would also see a giant disappearance and extinction of many different animal species, both on land, in the sea, and in our rivers and lakes. Many of these species are very iconic, and we would all be sad to see them go. Some of these being octopi, certain whales, salmon, other fish, frogs, salamanders, and potentially even a decline in animals like bears or deer.
You're now hopefully wondering if there's anything you can do to help. How can we fix this? Well, there are a few simple solutions that anyone can do. For starters, cutting down on the use of fossil fuels. One of the most common use of fossil fuels is in cars, so you can start by not driving a gasoline-powered car as much. Or, if you want to do everything you can, get an electric car, which is completely safe for the environment and can save you thousands of dollars on gas money.
Another solution to solve climate change is to switch to eco-friendly sources of energy, like solar, rather than using steam turbines, which rely on the burning of fossil fuels. Solar is completely renewable and doesn't need anything except sunlight, and produces nothing but clean energy.
Finally, the third and probably the most simple and easiest way to help prevent climate change is to recycle eligible used products like water bottles or soda cans. Recycling these products prevents them from being burned, which leads to the increase of temperature in the atmosphere, and rather reuses the materials to make new things, thus cooling the atmosphere.
Hopefully this widened your knowledge on the effects of climate change in Washington by at least a little bit.
And showed why it's important to know and take action because of it.
Together, we can put an end to climate change and restore our home back to its full health.